Hello, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be making a wedding arch, and for that I'm going to be using C24 timber. I think it will do very nicely for this wedding arch. Most of it will be this size, which is normally 4x2 and actually measures 98 or 45 millimeters, and I'm going to be using this for the uprights, the feet and the diagonals, and I should be doubling this up for the uprights and for the feet. For the cross piece right at the top, I'm actually going to use this. This is normally 6x2, which is actually 145 by 45 millimeters. Again, I'm going to try doubling this up. It's going to be heavy, but with the double thickness of the legs and wide feet, I think it's going to be perfectly stable. I'll have a hole in the ends and be able to actually pin that down to the ground, so there's no chance of it being knocked over. After some initial marking out, it's time to get cutting. So that's going to be one of the feet, and this is going to be one of the uprights. So these two pieces are going to be one of the legs, one of the uprights. I did wonder about nailing them or screwing them. The trouble is I want to plane down this face, this top face, and the underside as well. So I think what I'm going to do is actually use my domino mortiser. But one thing I thought I would check is look at the end grain, and I can see the grain goes in this direction and that direction. So the boards are actually very slightly cut on this face. So I think I want to swap these around. So now the grain is going around like that. And that cupping, there is a slight gap in the middle, but that's all right because it means this edge is going to marry up with this edge much better. Where if I put it that way, I can feel that it's kind of rocking. Probably just as well I've noticed that. I don't have dominoes of exactly the right length, so I'm just cutting down some much longer ones. I'll find you one at this end. Whoops. You know, I know these machines are expensive, and for a wedding arch it's a little bit overkill. You could use screws and nails, but the reason I'm not doing that is because I want to plane the surface down, and of course I don't want to catch the planer blade on screw heads or nail heads. And yes, you could punch the nails in under the surface, or you could countersunk the screws, but then that leaves you holes that need filling. So I think actually this is probably, in the grand scheme of things, just as quick. Well, for construction grade timber, that's fantastically straight. Right, well, I've got all these clamped up now, so I'm going to leave both of these uprights to dry and come back tomorrow morning for the next stage. I thought you'd probably like to have some measurements for this project. So the overall height of the arch is 2.15 meters, and that's about 84.5 inches. The width of the top is 1.8 meters, or roughly 71 inches. The feet are a meter wide, that's 39.5 inches. The two legs, including the tenon on each end, are exactly 2 meters, and that's roughly 78.75 inches. The distance between the legs is roughly 1.3 meters, or 51 inches. Well, these are glued up overnight. They look nice and tight joint down the middle here, which is great. So all I've got to decide now is, do I want to run these through the planer thicknesser or not? To do so, we'll just remove a little bit from this face and the underside, so that I can get rid of this double curve that's down the centre here, because that's rather a telltale giveaway that this is CLS timber. So I think perhaps I am going to do that. I'm going to run these through the planer thicknesser. So I've run these through the thicknesser, and they are exactly 90 millimeters square. Perfect. And just machining them down, taking some of the weight out as well, because they were going to be very heavy otherwise. So with that done, I can think about marking and cutting the tenons on these ends that will slot into the feet. Here I'm cutting the tenon on the bottom of one of the legs. Right, one large chunky tenon. I'm just making some trial depth cuts to make sure that that tenon is going to be 50mm square. Once I'm happy with that, I can go back to removing the remaining timber. Once cleaned up with a chisel, this is what they look like. So these two pieces are going to be the feet, and again I'm going to join them with dominoes. I've already marked these out, being careful to avoid the centre of the foot, which is where there'll be a rebate. I'm lowering the blade on my radial arm saw little by little for each cut until I reach the required depth. Ooh, that's very promising. So I've just got the top piece to do now, and again I'm going to glue together two pieces of timber. I'm going to be using 6x2s, which are actually 145 by 45. And then I've already cut on the top of these uprights a square tenon, 50mm square, so I'm going to obviously put a corresponding socket, the mortise, in the end of the horizontal, and that'll help keep them in place while I drive a big screw, probably a coach screw, straight down through the top. Now I'm only going to put one in here, but I'm going to put two in all of these, and again one just down this end, and the reason being I should be cutting this at 45 degrees. So let's do the same here. When I just off camera I decided to put a couple more slots in here and here, and they're not in the same position. They're not in line with these for a good reason. That's because I'm going to cut this at 45 degrees. So this will be trimmed at this point, and likewise that one will be trimmed that way. Because of course they go together like that. So once I've cut 45-degree angle off, obviously won't want the hole there. More gluing and more clamping. And oh look, I've got a helping hand to help me clean off that excess glue. To be honest, this doesn't really matter because it's on the top. I finally got this glued up and clamped. It was a bit of a struggle. I don't really like these clamps very much. They're not easy to do up. So I'm going to leave this now overnight to dry. It's 7:25, and there's been a Formula 1 motor race this afternoon, so I want to go inside, watch that, have a beer, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. The diagonal braces are all 4x2s. These are used for the feet. So I've cut all these four diagonals, these braces, and they're going to go between the uprights and the feet. And then I've got some slightly shorter diagonals too, and they're going to go at the top of the legs, and they're going to just brace the very top piece of the the wedding arch itself. So there's a couple of these, and I made them a little bit on the shorter side because it gives you a little bit more width between the two, a bit more head height. Don't really want the groom bashing his head on his wedding day. Now I'm planing all four sides of the top. With the top piece nice and square, I can mark out the positions for the mortise, which is for the top of the legs, and I can also shape the ends. We want 25mm here and 25mm here. Well, that's upside down as you're looking at it, but it's the right way up for me. So the next thing I've got to do is a 50 by 50mm square mortise in here that will take the tenor knots already on the top of the legs. I'll just block in the corners, then I know for sure. It's too easy to make a mistake, and then it takes a long time to rectify it. So that's 50 by 50, and it's probably a good idea just to double check this. For the time being, I'm keeping inside my pencil lines, and I'll trim back to them once I've got the bulk of the waste out. Oh, I think I'm pretty close now to getting this to fit. Oh, straight in. Now I've got to do the other end. If only woodworking was really this quick. Just as well I've got lots of headroom here. Right, that's a little bit too tight because I've got to assemble this at the wedding venue. If I was going to be making this up and gluing it, then I would probably try knocking that in a little bit further, but since I'm not going to be gluing it, I don't want to be struggling taking this out. So let's just take a little tiny bit more, sliver more off, and try again. I do really want this to be a little bit of a loose fit, bit of a compromise really. Oh yes, I'm happy with that. It's a very small square, but that sits very nicely. Right, that's all I wanted in there. Just a very, very small groove. That will guide the saw blade. Well, so much for my careful planning. I seem to have just nicked the edge of one of the dominoes, but never mind. Once it's stained, it really won't show. So that is one end. Time for a test fit of the legs into the top piece. 1487mm. 1487. 2430. Fabulous. I'm fixing the corner braces with 6 by 80mm stainless steel screws. I drill pilot holes and then screw in 8 by 100mm steel screws. These will cut a thread in the timber, and then, once I've removed them, I'll put in the stainless steel screws. The reason I'm doing this is because the stainless steel screws are not as strong as the steel ones, and I really don't want to snap them. I'm fixing the top rail to the posts with this very large mortise and tenon that I've already cut. But I'm not just going to rely upon that and the diagonal to hold this in place. I think what I'm going to do is to put a bolt all the way through into the top of the leg. And to facilitate that, I've already drilled a 10mm hole here, and I'm going to use a length of M10 studding. So, as I say, the hole is already drilled, and you can see it coming out through the bottom here. So what I have to do now is just to drill the hole in the end of the tenon. Let's lift this out of the way completely. I've set these two nuts so that this threaded rod is the correct length. So that goes in there now quite nicely. So I can just edge this out a little bit, and I can use my hacksaw and cut this off at this point. The threaded rod and nut sit just below the top surface. It's best to check that the socket is going to fit as well. Now I can do the same on the other end. I'm gluing the threaded rod with Evo sticks like that. It's really good stuff, and I've used it for years. It's exactly the same procedure for the foot braces as for the top braces. Pilot holes, countersink, steel screws, then whip them out and put in the stainless steel ones. So I've got 2 screws in the bottom here at the moment, but there are 4 screw holes, so I've got the option to put another 2 in if I want. I'm happy with that. With a round over bit in the router, I just ease all the edges. I've cut myself some pegs to go into these holes so that I can peg the sides down. I don't want any accidents on the wedding day with this falling over. There will be 100 guests there, and it only takes someone to do something a little bit silly and then we're all in trouble. So I've made 4 pegs which will drop into these holes. I'd like them to sit flush with the top of the foot, so I'm just going to nibble a bit of the wood out. I had a little go, a sample here with a scrap piece of wood, so I think it'll work perfectly well. So that's my next job. I've been using some of this wood filler just to fill the screw holes on 1 or 2 cracks that were on the sides of the uprights. So a little tip for you: when you are finished with your wood filler, make sure the top surface is wet when you put the piece of plastic back in, and then you'll find when you come to use it next, it won't be rock hard. Whilst the filler is drying, I can get on with cutting the notches for the steel pegs. I think that will be fine. So tomorrow, final day, I hope. I just need to sand down where I filled in a few places, and then I can apply the stain. See you tomorrow. it's a good idea to have a test fit. I think that's going to be all right. There's a whole variety of wood stains that you could use for this project. Water-based stains, spirit-based stains, varnishes, and I'm going to use Sadolin Classic. I've picked Burma Teak as the colour. I hope it's going to be a decent shade of brown. It's always difficult to know. And when stains are quite expensive, as this is, it was close to £19, you don't really want to be making a mistake and getting the wrong shade. I call this my Picasso dust sheet. It's had an awful lot of use. And as you can see, I'm no longer in the workshop. I decided to move down and paint this in the shade of the house. With that done, and because the sun had moved, I went back up to the garage to stain the remaining pieces. I left everything to dry overnight, and the next day I gave everything a light sand and a second coat of Sadolin. Well, the wedding arch is finished and it's ready for the big day. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and how about pressing that button to subscribe? It's free. I'll see you on the next video. You take care, and bye for now.